we're going through the Old Testament, and every time I get into a series, inevitably I will get off on a tangent. I don't like to call it a tangent. It's just another source of the same subject. And we have gone through the book of Genesis. We've gone through every character, person in the book fairly thoroughly. It took about 3 years to go through it. And then it took us to the end of the book where Joseph dies in Egypt. And then you get to the first chapter of Exodus. And Israel begins to multiply at such a great rate in Egypt that the Egyptians feel like they're going to take over Egypt. So the Pharaoh puts out a decree to kill all the male children that are born. And then, of course, Moses is taken by his sister and put into a little ark, a little basket, and he's caused to float down the river till Pharaoh's daughter draws him out. That's in the second chapter of Exodus. And that was, of course, Moses was 80 years old when he leads the children of Israel out of Egypt, and he goes before Pharaoh in that 4th and 5th chapter to tell Pharaoh, let the children of Israel go. So when you get from Exodus, the 2nd chapter, that's the birth of Moses, and when you get into this 6th chapter, God tells Moses in the 3rd and 4th chapter to go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And when you get on in that 6th chapter, and he's going before Moses, from Exodus 2 up to Exodus 6 is 80 years, because he is 80 years old when he goes to Pharaoh, and he's born in this 2nd chapter. And I like for you to pay attention to things like that so you realize some of these details of Scripture. Then we went on through Moses taking this message to Pharaoh up through the 12th chapter, and there are 10 plagues that happen. And this is to get Pharaoh's attention so God can soften his heart. First of all, he hardens his heart through each one of these, where he will not let the people go. And then he gets over to the 12th chapter. This is the last of the 10 plagues, last of the plagues. And when you get to that 12th chapter, that is the death of the firstborn in Egypt. Of course, what that means to Israel is they had to put the blood over the doorpost. And God says, when I see the blood, I'll call the death angel to pass over you. If there's no blood over the doorpost, then that person in the household who's the firstborn will die. Well, then they leave Egypt. They go through the Red Sea in the 14th chapter. And then they get to Mount Sinai in the 18th chapter, or the Mount of God. 19th chapter, Moses goes up on the mountain. 20th chapter, he comes down from the mountain with the 10 commandments. And then after that, in the 21st chapter, then you begin the common laws that they have to live by every day. And we got up to the 25th chapter. This is the beginning of God's instruction to build the tabernacle and all the furniture in the tabernacle, because this is going to be the method of their worshiping God will be in the tabernacle. And later on, under Solomon, when you get over here in 1 Kings, and you get there in the 4th and 5th chapters, you see the beginning of the building of the temple, and that will be an exact replica of the tabernacle in the wilderness. The tabernacle is a mobile temple. This will be stationary, and that will be built in Jerusalem. Now, we've gotten to this part over here in the 25th chapter where God's given instruction. And it has taken me on all the instruction to build the temple and build all of the utensils of the temple and build all of the... God's telling Moses, build this tabernacle. It'll be a tabernacle first, because whenever God gives the signal to move, that's when they have to get going, pick up stakes, pull all the tent down, and start moving. You've got the Ark of the Covenant in here, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the 7 candlesticks, the brazen altar, and the brazen sea. And this is everything. I call this the Capitol building, and I call the priests of God their leaders, I hate to call them politicians, but they are the leaders of Israel. And all the law that Israel has to live by comes out of this ark. And God comes down from the Shekinah glory cloud and sits on that ark. Or it's a cloud by day, and it's a fire by night. And wherever that cloud started moving, God didn't have to say a word. They just simply picked up and started moving with it, because they're not going to let God get away from it. And of course, he told them, whenever that cloud moves, you get things together and start moving. And they did. Now, we've gotten to the point, we've talked about building the Ark of the Covenant and how that was a picture of our hearts. All this was a shadow over here. This is a shadow. The very image is New Testament. Instead of having a literal temple, we're the temple of God. Instead of having the Ark of the Covenant, our hearts are the Ark, and our hearts are sprinkled. The Ark of the Covenant is sprinkled. Instead of having the altar of incense, the prayers of the saints goes up before God as a sweet-smelling savor. Instead of having this table of showbread, we being many are one bread and one body. But we've been talking about these candlesticks. That has kind of stopped me for some time. Of course, the altar is a picture of the altar. That's a picture of the cross, the daily cross as well as Christ's cross. And this is a picture of the washing with the blood of Christ. That's the brazen sea. We've been talking about these candlesticks. What has happened in this talk, it's taken me throughout the Bible with the candlesticks. There's some things we've learned about these candlesticks. I'm not going to go back through everything, but there's things that we have learned in this study. We have found that the candlesticks is the same thing. We believe here that they're the same thing as the menorah. And the menorah is, of course, that is the candlesticks. And this is the same thing as the Star of David. Now, I'm not going to go through all this. If you want to know why, and this is the first message you've seen, the reason it's the Star of David is because when you look at the candlesticks from the top, it forms a David star. That's called Magon David. When you see that Star of David, it's the candlesticks. The rabbis said David carried these candlesticks on his shield, and the Star of David is called Shield of David. Now, we've learned that these candlesticks, Revelation 1 and 20, that the 7 candlesticks where Jesus is standing there in the midst of the candlesticks in Revelation, the 1st chapter, how men can read that chapter and see Jesus standing amidst the candlesticks and not understand that that's Jewish is beyond me. Because the candlesticks, the first we see of them is Exodus, the 25th chapter. I think that's the law, isn't it? Certainly is. And then we see that Revelation 1:20, the Bible says, the 7 candlesticks are the 7 churches. And I keep saying this, and I need to emphasize this as much as I can. 7 all through Revelation, the 7 seals, the 7 vials, the 7 trumpets, 7 angels, 7 spirits. 7's all the way through the book is a sign of refinement. 7, there's not a scholarly man in any seminary in the world that knows anything about Scripture that will not agree that 7 is the number of divine refinement. It is a number of refining. 7 in the Hebrew is the word Sheba. Of course, it comes from the word Shabbat. And Shabbat is the word to take an oath. And this is the word 7. And Shabbat means to 7 oneself. And when you're 7'd, You add 7 things to your faith there in 2 Peter 1 and 5. And that's a constant, continual work of God in His people. So, the way I always like to say this, the 7 candlesticks is the refined church. And if it has any application to us, it's more than just 7 churches on the western end of what we call Turkey. They called Asia Minor. You had the church of Melita down here. You had the church of Troas up here. You had the church of Colossia down here. They had a lot of churches in Asia that were not one of the 7. I believe that God picked out 7 because each one of these 7 churches, and you find each church listed in the 2nd and 3rd chapter of Revelation, and each one of them had a glitch. They had a problem, each one of the church, that had to be refined. And the Scripture names them as you go through them. So we found that the 7 candlesticks is the refined church. And we also found out that in Revelation 5 and 6, that there is a lamb, which would be Christ, with 7 eyes. 7 eyes, which would equate to the candlesticks, and we see that in Zechariah 3 and 9, that there's a stone, and Jesus is the stone hewed out of the mountain that's not made by hands. He's hewn by the hand of God, or he's cut out of the mountain. There's a stone with 7 eyes. And then we see in Zechariah 4:10, the Bible is speaking of 7 candlesticks. And then it says in 4:10 that these 7 candlesticks are the eyes of the Lord. Well, if these candlesticks are the eyes of the Lord, and the candlesticks is the refined church, then the church and the candlesticks and the eyes of the Lord be one and the same. We found in 2 Chronicles 16 and 9, we found that the eyes of the Lord go to and fro throughout the whole earth, showing Himself strong in behalf of those whose hearts are perfect towards God. So what he's saying, the eyes of the Lord, which is the candlesticks, which is the refined church, go through the earth, and we do, as God's eyes, we do His seeing. I haven't said that. And of course we would do His seeing according to Zechariah 2 and 8. Zechariah 2 and 8, we've learned all of this, 2:8. He said, Israel is the apple of my eye. Whoever touches Israel has touched the apple of my eye. And that would be the eyes of the Lord, the candlesticks. And he says, Israel is the apple of my eye, and the word apple is the word baba. It means pupil. And we've also learned some things about the human eye. It means a pupil. We've looked at these chariot wheels out of a picture of a chariot wheel, a war chariot wheel out of McClintock and Strong. It's constructed just like a human eye. And it has, in the midst of it, it's got 6 points on a war chariot. 6 points. And it is a wheel and a wheel. It's a wheel and a wheel. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the 7th point is in the midst of the wheel. And on a Babylonian war chariot, you have the construction of a Star of David, or you have a six-sided figure, which is a hexagon. And we found some things out about hexagons. We found out this is the way the human eye is constructed. I took this out of some of my anatomy books that a doctor bought for me. And you have the pupil right here. The whole idea of the apple or the pupil of the eye is to see. The only place when you look at a person's pupil, there's nothing there. It's just a space goes into the eye. It's a place for the light to go in. There is some lenses there on the back side of the eye. Where the light goes in is through this. And we've learned that those lenses, I'm familiar with them. I had my cataract surgery in 1987 on both eyes. And they replaced those lenses. I went into anatomy books. Those are 1/5000th of an inch thick, and they are triangular shaped prisms. And we have learned that when a light goes through a prism, light is actually a construction of 7 colors. That's what it is. It blends together into 7 colors. We don't know how. When you pass it through a prism, it starts breaking off into 7 colors. And we learned also that when you punch someone in the eye, that bow bends there, and that bow is called an iris. And I believe that the iris of God's eye bows back, because Jesus, he said, whoever touches the apple of my eye, you punch me in the eye. When you touch my eye, my candlesticks, my church, you punch me in the eye, and this bow bends back. That's called an iris. And when it bends back, it immediately starts closing up to protect what's in the midst of the eye. And this is the bow of God protecting his church. And Jesus is coming back with eyes as a flame of fire. Punch someone in the eye, and the tears start running. We found that in Revelation 4 and 3, that we find the word rainbow. And rainbow, it's around the throne of God where the 4 cherubim are. Rainbow is the word Iris. And Iris was the goddess of the rainbow according to the pagans. And then we find in Revelation 10, verse 1, we find that we find the word rainbow again. Christ is coming back with a rainbow on his head, and this rainbow is around the throne of God. This is the only 2 places in the Bible you find the word rainbow. It is always the word iris. And of course, when the light goes into the eye, there's a lining, we've said, it's around the edge of the eye. And of course, this iris, when you look at it head on, it is wheels in wheels. And it is the outer wheel is a retractable curtain that closes up when the eye is punched. And God says, you punch me in the eye, my bow bends back to protect my people, and the tears run. And all he's going to need, it's like old Dr. Kemp said, he's not going to need any angels' help when he comes back to conquer us. His eyes will do the job. And he will come back with eyes as a flame of fire, taking vengeance on all those that know not God and that obey not the gospel. When the middle of we've also found that at the very back of the eye is what they call a yellow spot. Yellow spot. And that yellow spot's called the fovea, or fovea centralis would be more proper name. And that fovea is the main cone that begins to refine the images that come into the eye. I keep saying, when you see shapes, you don't see shapes, you see a refraction or refinement of colors. That's what you see with your eye. And of course, this yellow spot begins to refine the light. Well, that would be like, we're the light of the world. That yellow spot's refining it, sending signals to an outer layer of the eye that's called Jacob's membrane. And in Jacob's membrane, you have this layer of hexagonal-shaped cones, and these are hexagonal-shaped cones, and they start refining all these colors, and that's how you see is by this. Well, in these wheels, in these Assyrian war chariots, God said He's going to refine Israel by these Assyrian wheels. When you look at the wheels on the side, from the side, right in the center, that would equate with the center fovea here, you have these scythes. They're just like scythes that you cut down wheat with, and they would roll those chariots over the people as they were coming into a town, and they would run over them, just cut them down, and God says, I'll refine my people with this. What does this have to do with the yellow spot? The Bible says that in Nahum, the 2nd chapter, that when these chariots came in to Israel to cut them down, they ran like the torches. And the color of a torch, as these glistened in the light, was yellow. These chariot wheels are the same thing as the eye of God, and that's the church. And the church will refine what you know what this yellow spot is a type of trials, tribulation, along with all of these cones, these hexagonal-shaped cones. This is a picture of trial and tribulation that's going to refine the light, which is us, and we can see clearly. I don't know exactly the process, but some doctor can tell me about that. But we found that this wheel is a chariot wheel, and we find that Ezekiel is talking about, well, let me give you one other thing before I get to Ezekiel. Go over to Genesis, the 9th chapter. Genesis, the 9th chapter. Do I believe God is this exact? Yes, I believe that. You know what this does? This makes me afraid of God. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When you see that God can define something this exact, it ought to humble you. Now, go over here to the 9th chapter. And, well, before we get to the 9th chapter, let's look at chapter 7, and then we'll look at chapter 9. Look at chapter 7. This is the beginning of the flood. Noah's told to build an ark in Genesis 6:14, and he builds the ark in chapter 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day, were the fountains of the great deep broken up. I have made the statement, and that the geologists tell us the largest rivers in the world under the crust of the earth. And of course, what happened when the fountains of the great deep broke, the crust of the earth went boom like that. And nobody had a chance to go up there and knock on the door of the ark. Noah went in. God shut the door. Noah didn't shut the door. And then God says, it's time. Boom! And Noah went up on a wave about 5 miles high and just took off. And the people were instantly destroyed. Now, he says, the fountains of the great deep are broken up. The word fountain is the Mayana, M-A-Y-A-N-A-H. M-A-Y-A-N-A-H. Mayana. It is a derivative. One of its derivations is the word A-Y-I-N, which means an eye. Every time you find the word C-O-L-O-U-R, color. Every time you find color, it is the word A-Y-I-N. Joseph did not have a coat of many A-Y-I-N. They've got that messed up in the translation. Joseph had a coat of pos, which meant lengths. Now, it was made up of various types of material, but when it says Joseph had a coat of many colors, that wasn't Donnie, what's his name's, Osmond's coat in his Broadway play. That's not what it was. It didn't have all these pretty yellow and red and blue stripes. The reason they called it many colors is because it was a coat made up of various materials, but it didn't have to be necessarily colors. It was a coat of links, and it was a coat of authority. That's the reason they got mad. They didn't get mad because our father bought Joseph a new sport coat, and he didn't get us one. No, when he had on the coat of links, that meant here he was, the 11th son of Jacob, and Jacob had made him heir to the kingdom. That's why his brothers saw him coming. They're just going, they've made him the ruler over us. They were enraged. That's why they wanted to kill him. Because he had a coat of poss, not a coat of iron. That's not what it was. Now, look, he says, he goes on to say, and the fountains, or the eye of the Lord broke up, and did the waters begin to run. When you punch God in the eye, well, I'll tell you what, just punch your mate. Turn around and punch him in the eye and see what happens. Boing.
Tell her to punch me in the mouth.
The tears will run. It'll become inflamed. And that iris will begin to close to protect the light that's in the middle of it. And the light is the church, isn't it? All right. Then he says, the fountains of the great deep were broken up and the windows of heaven were open. It started raining from above and beneath. Those people didn't have a chance. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. It was up on the earth. It was raining 40 days and 40 nights, but they were 150 days there in verse 24 of chapter 7. They were 150 days in the ark. It stayed upon the earth and didn't assuage till 150 days later, but they were in the ark 370 days, excuse me. Now, look over here in chapter 9. God makes a covenant. Now, I'm going to read something here because this is going to come in later. All right. In chapter 9, verse 8, God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, and saying, and I, behold, I establish my covenant with you. When we get down to one of Noah's descendants, when you go from Noah to his son Shem, Arphaxad, and all the way down to Serug and Peleg and Reu and all these guys, and you get on down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when God established his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob, the covenant was here before Abraham. But he picked out Abraham to begin that official covenant line to take it all the way down to Jacob, whose name is changed to Israel. To Israel. So when he's establishing this covenant with Noah, I believe it's the same covenant he gave to Abraham. He skipped some generations until he decides to give the covenant with the land to Abraham. He's going to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he says, I'm establishing my covenant with you and with your seed after you. Well, that sounds like he's going to go through that bloodline down there, doesn't it? All the way to Abraham. He says, with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you. And let's go ahead and put this on the board because I'm going to use this in a little while here. With every creature with you, with the fowl of the air, he says, with every creature of the fowl, of the cattle, and of the beasts of the earth. The fowl, the cattle, and the beast of the earth, and with you, Noah, with man. Whenever we get to these four-faced creatures, when we get to them, and we're going to get to them over in Ezekiel, the first chapter. We're going to get to them in Ezekiel, the 10th chapter. We're going to get to these same creatures in Revelation, the 4th chapter. And we're going to see those four creatures around the throne of God, which is the Ark of the Covenant. which is the Ark of the Covenant. Ark of Covenant. And these four creatures, I'll get further into them when we get to Revelation, the 4th chapter. We're going to see these because the king, not F-O-W-E-L, F-O-W-L, the king of the fowl, or all through the Scripture, the king of all the birds is the eagle. And the king of the cattle is the ox. The leader of the cattle kingdom is considered the ox. And of all the beasts of the field, the lion is the king of the beast. All through the Scripture, we find Jesus represented as the Lion of Judah. We represent, the Bible represents Satan going about as a roaring lion, seeking whom may devour. The Babylonian king was represented as a lion, the most regal of all the beasts. Well, you have the eagle, the ox, and the lion. Whenever you see these, and man, you see four-faced beasts. You see them in the ark of the, you see them in the tabernacle. You see four beasts, and they all have the face. We don't know. We know that there were two woven in the veil, and we know there were two on each end of the Ark of the Covenant. We don't know whether each beast had four faces, or if one had the face of a lion, one had the face of a man, another had the face of an ox, the other had the face of an eagle. The point is, whenever you see these four-faced beasts, they are a picture of God's promise to retain His people under His covenant and to spare His people, His believing people. Not necessarily literal Jews, but Jews of the heart. Those are circumcised of the heart. Would somebody get me some more water? I'm just drinking this water like crazy. I'm about to run out. Now, so I want you to keep that in mind when we get there. Now let's continue reading here. This is the first place you find these four creatures. Now, let's continue reading. With every living creature, with the fowl of the air, the cattle, and of every beast of the earth, with you. It says, with you. That will be the fourth face, will be a man. From all that go out of the ark to every beast of the earth. Why didn't God form a covenant with the sharks, with the fish? They wasn't in the ark. They were on the outside of the ark, wasn't they? He said, with everyone that's in the ark. And I will establish my covenant with you, neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood. But it doesn't say they're not going to be cut off by a fire that consumes the earth, but by waters not again. Neither shall that any more be a flood to destroy the earth. The whole earth will not be destroyed with the flood anymore. But singing that the heavens will melt with a fervent heat, what kind of persons ought we to be in all holy conversation and godliness? There's going to be a great destruction upon the earth. And God said, this is the token of the covenant which I will make. The word token means a sign, uth, U-W-T-H. It has the same meaning as Simeon in the New Testament. Give us a sign. This will be a flag or a signal between you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow. Notice it does not say rainbow, even though that's probably what he's talking about. It doesn't say rainbow, it says bow. But a rainbow is an iris. An iris is a war bow when it comes to God, because he says, I'm coming back with eyes as a flame of fire. My iris is going to be bowed back from my church being punched in the eye. Punching me in the eye. I do set my bow in the cloud. The word bow is the word kesheth. Q-E-S-H-E-T-H. It means a bending, as in a bow for shooting. I do set my bow for shooting. It means strength, or the iris, or the archer, plus the arrow, or the bowman. It comes from the word kashah, Q-A-S-H-A-H. Q-A-S-H-A-H. And kashah means something that is cruel, fierce, severe. He says, I'm setting my bow. And of course, I've already said that a rainbow, when you see it from a mountaintop or from a high place, is actually a wheel in a wheel. It's 7 colors, as we said, concerning the human eye. It's 7 colors. That's what a rainbow is. It's wheels and wheels, 7 colors. And that's what a rainbow is. So a rainbow is the same thing as an iris. And God says, my iris will bend back and fierce terror. I will be the bowman. And when you look up the word arrows and bow in the book of Psalms and Proverbs, you find some very interesting things on that. God speaks of his arrows shooting men down. He's not talking about literal arrows. He says, I set my bow in the cloud. It shall be a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And the token is God's promise to preserve his people. Not just Jews, but his elect family that's got his word written in their hearts. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant. That's the whole point. This is all the bow. If you'll notice, I'll just kind of pitch this to you. Look in Revelation 4. Look in Revelation 4. Wherever you find this rainbow, you've got the 4 creatures close by. Look in Revelation 4. I'll go ahead and read to you about the 4 creatures while we're here. Revelation 4. And after this I looked, verse 1, and behold, a door was opened into heaven. Remember, heaven was a term for Israel. Or a door was opened into the church, or to Israel. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven. God's throne is the Ark of the Covenant. Now his throne is upon our hearts, isn't it? Look in Acts 7. Look at Acts 7. I don't leave you place here, but Acts 7. And that goes with this. Acts the 7th chapter. And look here in verse, I believe it's 49. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. God doesn't dwell in temples made with hands. What house will you build me, saith the Lord? Or what is the place of my rest? What are you going to build me when the heavens is my throne and the earth is my footstool? Back over here to Revelation, the 4th chapter. And the door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. This is certainly talking about the throne he sits upon is our hearts, I believe, because our hearts are the spiritual ark of the covenant. And he that sat, aren't we the temple of God? Didn't he sit inside that temple? Come down out of the fire and sit in the temple? This is all very figurative language. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow around about the throne, in the sight like unto an emerald. Well, figuratively, remember when we talked about the rainbow or the bow that God put in the cloud, and the 4 creatures were there that God named that he's going to keep his covenant with? Man, the cattle, the beast, and the fowl. Remember that? You had those mentioned in the same context as the bow put in the cloud, didn't you? Well, you got a rainbow here, and you got 4 creatures here, and a rainbow is around about the throne. I don't know how it was there, if it was a small rainbow, if it was just inside here, but there was a rainbow around about where these 4 creatures were. That's the point I want you to remember. Did you get that? So wherever you find these 4 creatures, even though it doesn't mention bow, the bow is the token of God's covenant, just like the 4 he's going to establish his covenant with, right? Then when you go over here, down in chapter 4, read a little further, and you see, well, I don't want to read all of it. You see 24 elders in verse 4. These are the 24 sons of Aaron through Ithamar and Eleazar. Then you see 7 lamps of fire burning. There's the 7 candlesticks, the 7 eyes of the Lord, the church. 7 lamps burning before the throne or in front of the throne. Right here. There's the throne, Ark of the Covenant, and is that in front of the throne? Isn't it? Well, sure it is. It's not like it's so hard that you can't come up with any answers. In the sight like an emerald, round about were 24 seats. These are the 24 elders from 24th chapter of 1 Chronicles. The 24 sons of Ithamar and Eleazar, which were the 2 surviving sons of Aaron. Then you got the 7 lamps, which are before the throne. And you had a sea of glass. In Exodus 38 and 8, Moses tells the women, bring me your looking glasses so I can make this brazen sea. And they all brought their glasses. They didn't have mirrors like we have. They saw their reflection in a bronze looking glass. And then he says, before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal. In the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts. Now, when you find the word beast in Revelation 11, Revelation 13, talking about the world beast, that's the word therion. Therion. When you find these 4 beasts, which are the same 4 beasts spoken of in the 6th chapter, this is the word zoon. We get our word zoo from this. It means living beings is all it means. It means live or animal, animistic in the sense they're living. It just means alive. You go to zoo to see living creatures. Remember zoopao means to make alive. Z-O-O-P-O-I-E-O. It's the word quicken, which means to make, poeo, alive. This word zoon just means a living being. That's what it means. So this is not the same word as beast. So when you see these 4 beasts in, well, I'll get to it in a minute. Okay. And he says, you see 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. Now we don't know exactly how that was. Maybe they had a face on each side. Maybe one had the face of an eagle, and the other had the face of a cattle, an ox on one side, and maybe this one had the face of a man, the face of a lion. Or maybe each one of them had a face of one of these. Nobody knows. But those were called cherubim or cherubim. These were cherubim right here. And around that throne was a rainbow. Now, look over here in Revelation 10. The only other place the word rainbow is mentioned. Christ is coming back. He doesn't have to put the 4 beasts listed here because his proof when he's coming back in chapter 10 verse 1, I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face it was as the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. Of course, this is Jesus right here because he has the little book open in his hand, and he's the same one that has the little book in 5 and 1. Now, look over here. Where I was going to take you from here. All right. So you got these 4 beasts. Look over here. You see these 4 beasts in verse, we'll look at chapter 6 of chapter 5. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne, that's the Ark of the Covenant. But we're the Ark of the Covenant now, and of the 4 beasts, the throne and the 4 beasts are associated with the rainbow, aren't they? Because of that 4th chapter, verse 3 says there's a rainbow around the throne where the 4 beasts are. So, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. And what are the spirits? Back in chapter 1, the 7 stars in the right hand of Christ are the 7 angels, or the 7 spirits of the 7 churches. Now, when you get on down here to, you got the 4 beasts in verse 8, and then you've got the 4 beasts speaking out when Christ begins to open the seals. In chapter 6, he opens the first seal, and a beast cries out, and then the 4 beasts say, come and see, in verse 1, and then the 4 beasts, remember the 4 beasts are these 4 right there that we revealed, aren't they? Well, I didn't finish reading here. Let me go back to chapter 4. Go back to chapter 4. I didn't finish this. 4 beasts full of eyes, and the first beast was like a lion. Verse 7, chapter 4, like a lion. The second beast like a calf, which is the same thing as an ox. And the third beast was the face of a man. And the 4th beast like that of a flying eagle. So this is nothing. When you see these, this is just God's covenant, isn't it? God's protective covenant. That's what it's talking about. Don't make something out of it more mysterious than it is. If you don't look at things abstract, you're not going to understand it. Do you actually think that God gave us this book with figurative language that we could not possibly understand? I don't believe that. If you check Genesis over here, and you check out these 4, everywhere you find it, it's going to be God's preservation of his people. Let me show you. Let me go through this kind of slow. In chapter 6, I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, I heard as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, come and see. One of the 4 beasts. He opens the first seal, and out comes a man riding a white horse with a bow in his hand. If you don't study bows, this was like the flying missiles of the ancient world. They would take 10,000 men with bows and just rain arrows on their enemy. Boy, they'd be falling like flies. And that always showed the heads of empires rode white horses. When you see the second 3 seals opened, this is a sealed book. It don't mean a book like this. Their books were scrolls. They would roll them up. They'd put an official seal on it. They had a seal, a signature ring, a signet ring. They would dip it in either hot wax or clay. They would seal an official seal, and when they sealed it, only an official authority could open it. That's why at the end of chapter 4, they say the one who sits on the throne is the only one worthy to open the book. And then it speaks again of him being worthy to open the book, to open the seals, and he starts opening the seals in chapter 6, and the beasts say, come and see, the 4 beasts. You got 2 sets of beasts, not 2 sets of beasts. You got one set of beasts, plural, and you got 1 beast, singular, which is the therion, the world beast system. But this is just messengers of God. So you find, he says, come and see. And then a man comes out on a red horse with a sword in his hand. And the beast says, come and see. The second seal was opened. Heard the second beast say, come and see. And then the third seal is open. And I heard the third beast. One of these four, each one of these beasts, is one of these four that's around the throne in verse 7. Do you see that? It's one of those. Each one of these beasts is one of these. This is very figurative. This is not literal beasts there shouting out something. It's figurative language about them showing the protection of any time you see these four, it's God's covenant. You understand that? It's just God showing that He's protecting us under His covenant. Then you go on down to the third beast. The second beast is the second one. The beast says, "Come and see," and we see a man riding a red horse with a sword. Well, the four judgments of God are the sword, the famine, the pestilence, and the world beast system. The first one riding the white horse, due to the fact that the second three is the sword, the famine, the pestilence, the first one has to be the beast system riding. You understand what I'm saying? When you got four judgments all through the Old Testament, sword, famine, pestilence, and it names three of them here, and the only thing that fits in that first chapter, there's been so many people argue about whether that's Jesus or whether that's the new revived Roman Empire. It's just silly. How long has the four judgments of God been riding in the world? Since the garden, haven't they? The judgments of God were riding all through the Old Testament. It wasn't like four horsemen coming out of a cloud like that stupid movie I saw one night, The Rapture. Some woman went out, and I thought, boy, this has got to be a funny movie. I got to watch this. It came on and said Rapture. I said, whoa. And some woman out in California or out in Arizona goes off out in the desert waiting for the rapture to happen. She sees four horsemen riding by her car as she's riding out there. I thought, what stupid guy wrote this movie? Did y'all ever see that? Dumb, dumb, dumb. And then she kills her little girl because she don't want to have to suffer under the beast or something like that. Wasn't that what it was? She kills her daughter or something and don't want to have to suffer. And it's just like stupid to the nth degree. Dumb. These stuff they make in Hollywood, I thought, this is the dumbest stuff in the world. Then you see the third horseman comes out as a black horse and has a pair of scales in his hand, and the third beast says, come and see, and saying, measure barley for a penny, and three measures of barley for a penny, and a measure of wheat for a penny. Well, if you don't know, a measure is a denarius. It don't mean a penny like an American penny. A denarius is that was a day's wages for a Roman soldier or for a slave. Remember the guy went out to hire those people for a day in Matthew the 20th chapter, and he hired them for a penny. It wasn't one of our pennies. It was a denarius, a day's wages for a slave laborer or for a soldier, a Roman soldier. Well, I get Russians in there. Same thing, bunch of Caucasians. All right. Then he says, of course, wheat was the rich man's food. Barley was the poor man's food. That's why you get three measures. And a measure would feed a man for one day. All this is showing is famine, shortage of food. That's been going on. Those are the four judgments of God with Israel. And three measures of barley for a penny. When he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, remember, these beasts are the one of these right here. Right? All right. How did I get in Revelation? I don't know. And I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, come and see. This is the fourth one. One of them's got the face of a lion, one's got the face of an ox, one of the eagle, or they've got all four faces. I don't know. It's not like there's a living being out there flying around like that. I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And upon his name, set on him was death, and hell followed with him, and power was given him over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with hunger, with death and with the Beast of the earth. This is pestilence. So you got the sword, the famine, the pestilence. And the first one that rides out, that depicts anyone riding the white horse. All of the commanders of those empires rode a white horse out there. So this is showing the sword, the famine, the pestilence, the beast. But these are the same four you find over there in Genesis. Aren't they? Same thing. We're going to find those same four beasts in Ezekiel, the 1st chapter, Ezekiel, the 10th chapter. What are they saying? God's protection over his people. And look over here. Now, look over here in the 7th chapter. And look at verse 1. After these things I saw 4 angels. These 4 angels are the same thing as these 4 beasts. Because watch what they do. It's what they do that counts. They're going to show the protective covenant of God with his people. They're going to show the covenant. Watch. After these things I saw 4 angels, or the same 4 angels. You've got 2 sets of angels. You got a set of 7. You got a set of 4. These 4 are not the 7. The 7 angels, when you look at the 1st chapter, the 7 spirits, he says, the 7 stars in my right hand are the 7 angels of the 7 churches. So those would be the preachers of the 7 churches. These angels here, angelos means a messenger. Are they going to send a message of God's protection? Sure they are. Now, just look at a little bit of this with me. I'm not going to go into all of it. And after this I saw these 4 angels, or the 4 beasts, standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. They said the earth had 4 winds. They thought the earth was flat. So they said they had a north wind, a west wind, an east wind, and a south wind. Winds of the earth. Remember what the Lord called Nebuchadnezzar? Called him an east wind. The winds were considered the powers of the earth that would come. And God says here, I want these 4 angels to mark my people as the covenant people of God. So they're going to mark them just like we see in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel, a man coming with an ink pen marking the people of God as the chariots come in to destroy Jerusalem. Mark my people. And the poor, there were many of the poor that were saved in that, and they stayed in Israel even after Nebuchadnezzar came in and slaughtered the land. They stayed there along with Jeremiah. So there were a people protected and kept there in Israel. And it goes on to say, I saw another angel descending from the east, having the seal of the living God. This is one of the angels with the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of God and confirmed the covenant with God's people in their foreheads. Now that's going to be another subject. He don't mean stamping you with something in your head. When you go to the 4th chapter of Deuteronomy, he said, take my law, put it before your eyes, put it on your hand, put it where you lie down, where you walk, where you rise up. Put my law everywhere. To put between the eyes meant to put into the mind. That was an old ancient Jewish saying. So he's saying, and I heard the number of them that were sealed. There were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Of course, 144,000 are those who follow Christ wherever he goes, and they're the redeemed of the earth, and they are the first fruits there in the 14th chapter of Revelation, and we, being many, are a kind of first fruits. Of his own will begat he us by the word of truth, that we be the first fruits. So 144,000, 12 times 12, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles, and so forth. And 12 baskets, so that none would be lost in the 6th chapter of and we're the bread, and there were 12 baskets of bread taken up so that none would be lost. And later on in that chapter he says, this is the will of God, that of all that he had given me I should lose nothing, and none of the 12 will be lost. And that's a figurative number. Now, y'all want to repeat that? I hope you can see some of this. Main thing I'm wanting you to see is these creatures. When you see these, it's covenant, is what it's talking about. That's not hard to understand, is it? Good. Now, let's go back. I think I've covered a lot that I want to cover. Let's go back to the first chapter of Ezekiel. Then we can see this. I don't know if it's something else I wanted to show you here. It's a whole lot in Revelation to show. Now back to Ezekiel. It's funny, this all took us here with the 7 candlesticks. How much time do I have, Mike? All right. Maybe I can finish up a lot of this. I'm going to erase some of it so I can draw some more on the board if I need to. All right. Man, I don't want to erase that. Just so much here. I need 2 of these big boards. Somebody go get me another one real quick. I'd like to have 3 big boards just spread out so I could fill them up. Now go back to Ezekiel, the first chapter. We've already said that Ezekiel is talking about the destruction of Israel. One more time. Ezekiel, there are 3 deportations, major deportations in Israel. One was 605 BC. The other was around 597 BC. This is before Christ. In other words, 597 years. And one in 586 BC. 586 BC was the total destruction of Judah, where Nebuchadnezzar comes in and wipes the place clean except for a certain number of poor people. He leaves the poor alive. Those are the ones that appear to me had the marks in their heads or in their minds. 605 and 597 were peaceful deportations. There was probably a great number of people removed from Israel. Why were they deported? Because over here in Babylon was a mother to all the kingdoms of the world as she was ruling them. And she was protecting Israel. And Israel was supposed to be bowing to whatever they said. But Israel got to where they didn't pay tribute. Tribute is like toll money. It's money, it's like tax money you pay to Babylon for their protection. And since they are the ruling power of the world at this time, you had to do whatever they said. Well, Israel was completely rebellious, not only to Babylon, but against God, going after all these idol gods all those years. And Israel, at times, was going over here to Egypt, which they had no business, and Egypt was no match for Babylon. I guess they thought since Babylon was about 650 miles away, and Egypt was just a couple hundred miles, 150, they could get over here easier to get some kind of sustenance or protection from Egypt. When Jeremiah was preaching to them for 40 years, he says, don't go to Egypt. If you go to Egypt, God will have one of these Babylonian soldiers chase you down in Egypt and kill you, and he won't even know what he's doing. He'll know he's killing his enemy, but he won't know that it will be the word of God that comes to his mind to come kill you. He said, you go over here. You have never kept my sabbatical years. You go over here and stay in Babylon for 70 years till I let the land lie fallow. And a lot of the people were so rebellious that Nebuchadnezzar had to come in and just destroy them and annihilate them. But the poor and the people who were cooperative, he let them come over here, and he let a certain number of poor ones, the ones that he kept, the ones that was real important to him were the artificers in metal, the people who could make swords and could make chariots and they could build war machines. He took those to Babylon. And he left only the poor over here. And Jeremiah stayed here with the poor. And I believe those poor are the ones that God marked in their foreheads that we find in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. Now let's read here in Ezekiel, the 1st chapter. Once we've explained all this, maybe we can understand this. I haven't spent a little bit of time on this. I've worked on this for decade after decade after decade, trying to see this picture. I keep telling everybody, read your Bibles more than anything else, and compare Scripture with Scripture. If you run across a fowl and cattle or beast, or an eagle, an ox, and a lion, and a man, it always has the same application. When you see this, you're seeing God's covenant with His people that He's going to keep. And it may not be that, He don't necessarily mean His covenant is going to be that you personally won't die. His covenant is with you and with your spiritual man, that He's birthed by His will. Now, let's read here. Now it comes to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river Kibar, that the heavens were open, and I saw visions of God. We've said that it is believed that Ezekiel was in this 597 peaceful deportation. He is prophesying of the total annihilation and destruction of southern Judah. Northern Israel has already been destroyed in 722 BC. So all you got left is southern Judah, which is comprised of Judah and Benjamin. That's all you have left. And God is fed up with southern Judah because they have gone after the way of northern Israel, who went after Baal in the grove through Ahab and Jezebel's bringing this down there into Israel and building temples for Baal in the grove. And it came down into Judah through their daughter Athaliah, and it bled all the way down here. And God says, and what Ezekiel, look here, Ezekiel says 593, I believe it could be 593, 597 to 593. So it shows Ezekiel right here at the last, as one of the last men to be prophesying in southern Judah. Of course, Jeremiah was prophesying all that time. Shows the arrow going all the way down here. That means Jeremiah, Habakkuk, Daniel, and Ezekiel were all prophesying during this time period. Now, Ezekiel is carried away in the peaceful deportation. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel, the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans, which is Babylon. He was carried away over here. Carried from Israel, down here in southern Judah, all the way over here to Babylon. About 600, 700 miles. Now, he's over here. He's over here. Jeremiah's still over here because Jeremiah's never carried away. Remember that? When Nebuchadnezzar comes in, Nebuchadnezzar has Nebuzaradan, his commander-in-chief, to go tell Jeremiah, we heard that you're honorable. You tried to warn these people we were coming. They didn't listen. You can go to Babylon. We'll give you all kinds of land in Babylon. We'll raise you up and make you mayor of your own city. Nebuchadnezzar saw the honor in Jeremiah. And Israel had wanted to kill him. The princes of Israel wanted to kill him. And Jeremiah says, I will stay here with the poor. So Jeremiah never goes to Babylon. Ezekiel's in Babylon. Daniel's in Babylon. He gets carried away. These are prophets in Babylon. Jeremiah stays over here. Keep that in mind. All right. The word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the priest. He's the descendant of Aaron, isn't he? Has to be. The son of Buzi, in the land of Babylon, or the Chaldeans. Chaldeans were the magicians of the Babylonian system that had everything to do with them. By the river Kibar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. And I looked, and behold, a great whirlwind. Now, we've already established that chariots were whirlwinds. 2 Kings 2:1, 2 and 11. Psalms 58 and 9, Proverbs 1 and 27, Isaiah 17 and 13, Jeremiah 4 and 13, Isaiah 41, 16, Isaiah 66, 15, and Jeremiah 4, 13, Jeremiah 30 and 23, Ezekiel 1 and 4 right here, that whirlwinds were chariots. And they were particularly war chariots because they stirred up dust like a whirlwind. They're chariots. I'm not going to, you want to read those, you can read them yourself. If you don't remember them, look up whirlwind in your concordance. It's not like it takes a genius to do that. When you look up whirlwind, read all the verses, it'll tell you over and over and over that the whirlwinds were chariots coming in to destroy. Well, that's who they were. And they're coming from the north. I keep saying, everyone that attacked Israel, all this is desert. This is the Arabian desert out here. Nobody's going to take off through the desert. Not 1,000 miles over here, or even 500. You don't go 500 miles through the desert. The green part of a map is the traversal part. Always when they were going to attack, they'd come from the east and attack from the north. So when it says, I saw a whirlwind out of the north, it's war chariots. I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, and a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself. A brightness was about it, and out of the midst of the whirlwind, there was the color, the ayin. A-Y-I-N is the word color. The color of amber. Amber is yellow. And when you looked at those sights, it's like Nahum, the 2nd chapter says, they flash like lightnings and like torches, and that color is yellow. And amber is yellow. So we see the very structure of the eye in these chariot wheels. We see the eyes of the Lord there. We see the Star of David. We see the God's destruction. So when destruction's coming, He's going to paint a picture also of His covenant with His people, isn't He? He's not just going to come destroying without showing us, I'm going to protect you. He is our Savior. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Aha! Wonder what that is. Yeah. 4 living creatures. Out of the midst of what? The whirlwind. If you've got this picture from last week, anytime they put those, they had cherubim. The Assyrians were supposedly supposed to have stolen the cherubim from Israel. Cherubim had wings. They had sometimes the body of a lion or the body of an ox. Body of an ox. The head of a man. The body of a lion. The head of an eagle. I think they got that from God, didn't they? You got these cherubim all through here. Here they are. There's the wings. Those are Assyrian cherubim. Head of an eagle, the body of a man. Body of a lion. There's the body of a lion. There's the body of a lion, the head of an eagle. They did them however they wanted to. They readjusted what they saw them. Then you have, here's an Egyptian war chariot. The Babylonians were the same thing. In fact, right here is a war chariot, wheels and wheels, with that 6 spokes, war chariots. And on this one right here, that's called, even though it's a lion, it's called a cherubim. It's a cherubim. So whenever they saw, they would decorate their chariots up to look very fierce. They would decorate themselves, put on fierce helmets or faces of any kind, or eagles' beaks on them, or they decorated themselves up to look like something fierce. So when they came in, They had the cherubim on the side of their chariots. I'm absolutely sure this is what it was. Now, let's keep reading. Out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Every one had 4 faces. Every one had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet. He's saying their feet are not moving. It's the wheels that's moving. This is very figurative language. The feet were straight. The wheels, wherever the wheels went, it goes on to say that these cherubim were going. Well, when we studied the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 5th, and 6th, and 7th, and 8th, and 9th, and 10th chapters, we see that this is Babylon coming in to attack Israel, southern Judah. Haven't we already seen that in the last few Wednesday nights? When you read 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, you see that's what it is. Like I said, you want to find out what a chapter is about, read the following chapters. When you read the following chapters, it's about Judah's demise. Then he goes on to say, their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. Sometimes they would interchange the body parts on the cherubim. They'd put calves' feet, or they'd put bodies of, and they would decorate their chariots up to look like some fierce thing that's coming in to destroy. And they sparkle like the color, or like the eye. And the word color is eye, and it's eye. And what do you see with your eye? Colors. I keep saying, you don't see shapes. You see a refinement of colors in your eye. All ophthalmologists know that. I've told my ophthalmologist, I told a couple of them about this. They said, that's really interesting. And I gave them some copies of one of the Eyes of the Lord series I did about 20 years ago, and never got a comment. They just told me it was interesting. They probably never had anybody connect the Bible with their vocation. Most people don't. Now, and their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings. Sometimes they would have wings, or the word wing means flap, or it means edge. And what would be the hands of the man under the wings? It'd be the guy driving the chariots, right under the edge of the wings. It's the guy driving the chariot. He's describing chariots coming in and destroying them. And on their 4 sides, they had their 4 faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They didn't have to turn. The chariots were turning. The wheels were turning, weren't they? It's not like, do you think God actually gave us something we couldn't understand? I don't believe that. The Word of God is profitable for doctrine, for reproofs, for correction, instruction, and righteousness. How could it be? Well, this is too mysterious a thing for us to understand. You can't understand it unless you go back and look at some cherubim in history, and some chariots, and see the wheels and the wheels, and each chariot would be different. You got that picture there. They'd all be different. These guys were fierce people. Those are Syrians right there. Those people were as mean as anything you ever run across in your life. They'd cut your head off. They'd split your belly open to watch you wallow and to laugh while they're leaving, cursing in some Assyrian language. Now, verse 10. And for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and they 4 had the face of an eagle. Okay. That makes it a lot easier to understand once we already established who these were. What do you think this is talking about? I believe while these chariots are come in to slaughter Israel, this is a picture of God's protective covenant to His people. He doesn't destroy the enemy without showing some sign of his protection to us, does he? These were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. Now, we can't really picture this or see this for what it was. Not completely, because nobody's been there and watched this thing take place. And they went every one straight forward whither the Spirit was to go. And they went, and they turned not when they went. I believe the Spirit is the Spirit of the Lord leading these chariots to go in and slaughter Israel. This is Israel's end. Didn't he keep telling them? Didn't he tell Jeremiah, pray not for this people? He told Ezekiel in this book, don't pray for this people in the 14th chapter. I'm not delivering them. They went after Baal in the Grove and Shemash and Molech, a system that was brought in the church and renamed Christ's Mass. If God's going to have Ezekiel prophesy against Israel for doing this thing, and this is the destruction he's going to bring, do you think he wants us to celebrate Christ's Mass? I don't think so. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire. They were probably made of metal, and they shined and glistened in the sunlight. Like the appearance of lamps. Of course, the lamps was like the center of those wheels that glistened like the torches in the light. And they went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Well, remember that over there look at Nahum. I'll remind you of what Nahum said. This is when the Assyrians came in to attack northern Israel. Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, right after Micah. Nahum, the 2nd chapter, God dasheth in pieces, is come up before thy face, keep the munition, watch the way, make thy loins strong, fortify thy power mightily, for the Lord hath turned away the excellency of Jacob, which is Israel, as the excellency of Israel, for the emptiers have emptied them out. The emptiers were the Assyrians, and marred their vine branches, and the shield of his mighty men is made red. The valiant men are in scarlet. The chariot shall be with flaming torches in the day of his preparation, and the fir trees shall be terribly shaken, and the chariot shall rage in the streets of Israel. And they shall jostle against one another in the broad ways. They shall seem like torches. They'll be like lightning and like torches. They shall run like the lightnings. And they're going to, boy, those armor of those Assyrians are going to be flashing in the light. They're going to have these cherubim on the side of their chariots, and they're going in just slaughtering. And you know what this is going to do? That yellow spot is going to refine the people of God when God shows his covenant. This is just like what's going on in the world today when the church is attacked, and we are under attack right now. God is showing us his covenant and how he's going to protect us in eternity. And our protection is spiritual. We're not to fear him that can destroy the body, but fear him that can destroy both soul and body in hell. Let's continue reading here. And now I beheld the living creatures. Behold, one wheel upon the earth, by the living creatures with his 4 faces. The 4 faces are these 4 right here. Do I believe that that's literal creatures here? No. I believe these are chariots. It's amazing to me. I was looking these up in McClintock and Strong, and it's in one of this cherubim thing. I looked up McClintock and Strong long after I'd started studying this being chariots. I just happened to be reading under cherubim or chariot wheels. They said, McClintock and Strong said, some have the ridiculous idea, like Claremont, that this is chariots coming into Israel. And I said, yeah, and like Jim Brown too. And I studied that. That's all it said about chariots was Claremont said it was chariots. Well, me and Claremont, whoever he was, some historian, we agree. I've never heard anybody explain any of this. I never heard anybody say that the whirlwinds were chariots. Yet you go into nearly every place whirlwind is mentioned in the Old Testament, talking about chariots coming and slaughtering. Isn't it? And how was it that Elijah went up to heaven? By a whirlwind in a fiery chariot. Amazing, isn't it? And the living creatures, and we're still talking about the eyes of the Lord, are the candlesticks. Like I said, if that Assyrian war chariots, old Babylonian war chariots come in, and some priest of God was out there, and he saw that wheel in the wheel, and he saw, and he knew anything about David's star or the seven candlesticks, and he saw those chariot wheels like so, I believe he recognized that as the candlesticks. And like I said, God would have had to have touched some pagan's heart to make that war chariot that way. I mean, that would be nothing but the sovereignty of God. Now, and the appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color or the eye of beryl. Topaz is actually what it was. And they four had the likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel. In the middle of a wheel, Ezekiel saw the wheel way up in the middle of the air. One wheel run by grace, the other wheel run by the grace of God. A wheel and a wheel. Whoever wrote that don't know how much he was talking about, did he? And when they went up on their four sides. They turned not when they went. The four beasts didn't turn. And for their rings, just means rims. They were so high, they were dreadful. And their rings were full of eyes, round about them four. What? How could these wheels and wheels be full of eyes? Full of wisdom? Full of eyes was a term that meant full of wisdom. Remember we talked about the 28th chapter of Isaiah, and the Bible says, who is going to teach Israel? Line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. And then he says, for with men of stammering lips and another tongue will I speak to this people, for all this they will not hear. Stammer meant it sounded like a stuttering sound, because the Assyrians spoke a dialect of the Hebrew when they come in screaming with their whips and with their chariot wheels. Did those chariot wheels have any wisdom in it when it came to teaching Israel the truth? Oh, you bet. Kind of like saying, like I've said before, you won't listen to me, you'll listen to this belt. This belt will teach you. Were those wheels full of eyes? Yes, sirree, they were. Full of eyes was an old ancient Israel idiom that meant full of wisdom. Those wheels had the wisdom to tear Israel down. It's like David said, deliver me from the wicked, which is thy sword in thy hand. God says, I'll pick up this sword and cut my people to the ground. And there'll be wisdom in this sword concerning your mind. It'll teach you. You know, it's hard to get these things unless you study the whole picture, isn't it? You know how many times I've gone over and over this? 1,000 times. I don't know how many. Defining. They were dreadful. Their rings were full of eyes round about them four. When the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. Where the living creatures went, the wheels were there right by them, because they were the chariot wheels. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, boing, boing, they're running fast. They're doing a lot of bouncing and flying off of the earth. I don't believe this is hard to understand. When they were lifted up off of the earth, the wheels were lifted up with them. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. I believe this is saying the Holy Spirit is leading them to cut Israel to the ground. And the protected ones are going to be under the covenant, and we'll see that in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. And when those, for the spirit of the living creatures was in the wheels. When those are, The Spirit of God's covenant was in the wheels. Right? I hope you can get the figurative language on all of this. When those went, and when those stood, these stood, and when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up against them. For the Spirit of the living creature was in the wheels of the living creature. Would that be the man driving the chariots? And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creatures was as the color of terrible crystal. What was the firmament? The air, the atmosphere around them. What was going on there? When you read the first chapter of Nehemiah, you find that Israel had been burnt to the ground, that Jerusalem had been burnt. There was a flaming fire when southern Judah was brought down. You could see fire in the sky. You saw chariots. This was a horrific thing. Probably millions of people were killed in Israel. Some were carried off into Babylon. The poor were there. Israel was burnt down. You remember Nehemiah got the message that the walls of Israel were burnt, the gates were burnt, and his heart was broken. So when he sees this vision, he's seeing a vision of Israel, not just the chariots coming in, screaming, yelling, cursing, babies being ripped out of mothers' bellies, dashed, and people screaming, running for their lives. The flame is shooting to the sky from the buildings in Israel. They're burning everything to the ground. One of the saddest days in Israel's history. So when he's talking about the firmament being terrible like crystal, it means to hail or resemble rocks coming down. I don't know if what God did wasn't, if he didn't cause some volcanic eruption or who knows what. Stretched forth over their heads, and under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Every one had two, which covered on the side. And I don't know how to describe these cherubim. And every one had two, which covered on that side their bodies. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise. The word is kanaf. And the word wing is kanaf. It means flap or pinnacle or an edge or an extremity. Like the noise of great waters, the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech. These chariots were bringing the voice of God in. It was God's way of saying, I'm destroying you, Judah, like I've destroyed your sister Israel. And the noise of a host. I don't believe you can reproduce what was happening in Israel. I believe there's no way to paint a picture of the terror and the screaming and the yelling and the fire and the flames and the chariots. When Nebuchadnezzar decided to come in, he said, it's over. I'm going to wipe this thing clean. They burned it to the ground. They pulled all the rocks of the temple down. They carried away all the vessels of the house of the Lord. They left nothing but the poor. They literally plowed the city up. And they would salt it down with salt so nothing would grow. And when they drove away and their chariots headed back to Babylon, it looked like a wasteland. That's what Jerusalem looked like. And Israel was carried captive. And they've been captive for 2,600 years. It's a long time. Am I out of time? I'll read down to the end of this. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood and let down their wings. And above the firmament there was over their heads was the likeness of a throne. I believe that this is a picture of the throne of God that's in Jerusalem, and God is judging from there. And was the likeness of a throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone. Upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. And I saw as the eye, the color of amber, as the appearance of fire round about within it. From the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire. And it had brightness round about, and the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain. That's a reference back to Genesis, isn't it? So was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. When I saw it, I fell upon my face and heard a voice of one that spake. And he said, and then he goes into the judgment he's bringing over Jerusalem. We went through that chapter earlier. When you read the second chapter, you know what the first chapter has to be about. Because this second chapter is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And the way it was destroyed was with chariots. I can't give you the meaning of every word in the first chapter, but I believe it's the destruction of Jerusalem and southern Judah. Because that's what Ezekiel's calling was for. And that's what Jeremiah's calling was for. Ezekiel has some of the most puzzling words as far as people are concerned. But once you establish what the whirlwinds are, they're chariots. There's no doubt. Once you establish the wheel and the eyes of the Lord and the candlesticks, you can see this. Well, let's pray. Father, we thank you for truth. Help us to continue this work, and Lord, continue to open up these pictures for us. God will continue to praise you for all things. Open up many doors for this ministry, and we'll continue to praise you for all that you do and preach this truth. Lead us to your elect in Christ's name. Amen. Whew. Well, I believe that's what that's about. Hope y'all can. Hey, what are you doing, brethren? You doing okay?
Okay, yeah.
Hanging on?
Yeah, I saw a program